Good morning. Today I will be talking about my video log number two, and I'll be addressing how Emiliano felt in the school systems, with the staff, with the teachers, and how he felt overall, support-wise, how he felt overall in the school. So when I was talking to Emilio about the teachers that he was, exposed with, he was saying how the teachers were used more as guides. They guided people to the answer. So not a lot of, he said, not a lot of uh, critical learning occurred. It was more of like leading horses to the water, expecting them to drink. So a lot of people that that Emilio had in class, um, that Emilio thought were at a more advanced level. So the teacher was acted as a moderator, just guiding people to the answers. So for Emilio, who was someone that felt like he was behind or lacking in a particular subject, he felt less inclined to really reach out and really ask for help, since other people were already so ahead of him, and he figured that he would be the only person in the classroom that had a problem with it, or didn't understand the full material. So knowing that, that restricted, that made him less likely to speak out, less likely to ask for help, because he didn't want to stand out in that way. He said that teachers, when it comes to support, they didn't offer much. He saw teachers as merely people doing their job, there to teach the greater majority of people, and not him in particular. He knew that him being a minority, him being Hispanic, him being one of the only Hispanic kids in the whole classroom, and in the whole school, he knew that he wasn't going to be represented well. He knew that he wasn't going to be basically that respected and that valued. So when the teacher was asking questions about college and about futures, and just questions that more catered to the Caucasian demographic of students in class, and not to the minority of students in class, when situations like that happen, Emilio saw himself withdrawing, and he saw himself honestly creating a little resentment towards those in the dominant class, because they were able to participate, in those kind of talks, and really develop that connection with the teacher. And personally, I think that is a result from the teacher simply choosing not to acknowledge Emilio as an individual and as a minority. They choose not to teach what he would like to learn, simply because he's a minority. I think that kind of feeds into the mindset of, since it's only one of him, we're just gonna throw him in with the rest of them, and hopefully um, he learns along with that. So we talk a lot about the three R's when it comes to not learning, which is something that Coles talks about in his reading, the concept of not learning. And I think that it's really interesting how Emilio uses to not uses the skill how to not learn within certain classrooms. So he talked about his math classroom, how math was a challenging subject, and he chose to simply not learn in that class. Um, he saw that, since he saw that if he was getting bad grades in that class, that the teacher wasn't very helpful. That wasn't very supportive. There was no parent-teacher conference meeting telling Emiliano's parents that he was failing his class, and Emiliano also said that there was no teacher-student connection or talk, telling Emilio, hey, you've been failing this class. Do you need some help? Blah blah blah. Things like that never happened. They just kind of watched him fail. Um, and what Emilio started to develop the mindset was that, well, if I'm failing it and they don't care, then I don't care. So from that, that further continued the you could say the failure rate of his high school career. He said that he has never been good at math. Math is not his strongest subject, and I personally believe that is because someone in his high school career, a teacher told him in his high school career that math may not be for him. It may not be his best suit, but other things were better suited for him. So to go back to the topic of not learning, Emilio also used not learning within his own culture. Emilio said that as his high school career developed, that he started to turn that resentment that he had towards the dominant that he had towards the dominant class into jealousy, and then started to actively put himself in more situations with the dominant group. So going to football games, going to club events, going to more events where more dominant culture was being represented, learning these inside jokes, learning basically just how to be a part of the dominant a part of the dominant class. But as he would say, fly low radar. So he just wanted to be a participant in this culture, but not necessarily someone that was showcased in the culture. And obviously, he wanted to keep a couple of his own cultural identities, being Hispanic. Um, but to go back to the main topic, to choosing to not learn, Emilio chose to not learn a lot of his own cultural aspects. So, being Hispanic, learning Spanish is definitely one of the big cultural norms that you find. And Emilio said that one of his regrets today is that he doesn't know Spanish to his full ability. Because in high school, he spent the later half of his high school learning about the dominant culture, learning how to fit in, learning what it took to be a minority in a predominantly white institution. He focused so much on that, so much on fitting in, so much on that dominant group approval that he neglected, and he chose to not learn some of the cultural traditions and cultural practices of the Hispanic community. So he can't communicate with his mom as well as he would want to, because he took so much time away from that. And now as an adult, going back, relearning the language. Obviously, it's a hard process for him. But he said that that's something that he would definitely like to get accomplished in the near future. I think that it's very interesting how Emiliano was able to develop a cultural identity, unlike the culture that people see him as. So his cultural identity, when you ask him, he would say it's Caucasian. That's the culture that he represents the most. That's the culture that is involved in his daily life when it comes to holidays, when it comes to traditions, when it comes to thinking of what the future is and what success is. And what success is, the white picket house with the wife and the 2.5 kids with the dog. That is what his reality, a reality that he has constructed from what he has learned from students in high school. I think that's really interesting because when he sees people who value their Latin heritage, he almost looks at them in envy, almost as like that's another path that he could have taken. He could have stayed very withdrawn from the school, and very involved in his own family affairs, and grew his Hispanic cultural identity. But instead, he chose to go out and learn a different one. And he said that created a couple hostile and confrontational situations within his own home. Almost made it a divided home, you could say, because him and a couple of his siblings went to the same high school and all went through the same cultural patterns of almost forgetting where they came from before, and going towards the dominant, and going towards the dominant culture. In the call reading, it talks about a Hispanic man who simply chose to not learn English simply because of this factor, because he wanted to preserve that Hispanic heritage that he held true to himself. So I think this is a great example to see the um, the alternative to that, how basically just by learning one culture you almost erase the cultural identity of another culture. Just because you look a certain way obviously doesn't mean that you have to correspond with that culture. Thank you.